God, I feel like so many people are against me right now. They keep telling me you can't help. But I believe you will protect me. You are the one who is with me and who answers me when I call out to you. When I go to sleep, I trust you will sustain me. I will not fear those who are after me. Rescue me, God. Destroy my enemies. My victory is in you.
Hey everyone, I know a lot of you every week hear stories about my wife and my kids, and so we wanted to take this week to share a story with you that is very dear to our hearts.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole.
I'm Christian. I'm Ellie.
And we are the
Rollin
Rollin family!
How are your name?
Our story begins back in 1998. We met at college at North Central University in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it took me 4 years to convince this little lady here to go on a date with me. We dated our entire senior year at college, and then after we graduated, I snuck to her hometown of Wisconsin and proposed to her right there in a restaurant in front of all of her family and friends.
And of course, I said yes.
And in 2002, we took a youth pastor position back here in Michigan, and shortly after that, me and this little lady got married.
We got married! So in 2005, we thought it was time we'd start trying, and we were just happy about it. You know, our friends were starting to have family and babies, and I've always loved kids. I grew up always wanting to work with children, and got my degree in children's ministry, and now I'm a children's photographer, so kids have always been such a big part of my life, and I've just always dreamt about having my own and just how special that would be.
And it's like everyone around us is having kids, and it's happening just like that. And for us, month after month, there was no answer to prayer. And kind of thinking, what's going on? What's happening now? And I shared a little bit last week with you that I have a medical condition that I've grown up with, and in this process I'm thinking, you know, my whole life I've had medical issues, and now here's another thing that I can't do, another thing that is weighing on me and discouraging me. And I would drive home from work night after night, and I would just talk to God and have a conversation with Him. Say, God, what's going on? You know, it's been months now, it's almost up to a year. We've been believing you for a child, and yet there's nothing. You're the giver of life, but yet my wife and I can't produce life. What's going on? And I really began to get depressed. I began to get discouraged, and I got to the point where I didn't even know what to say to God anymore.
So another year goes on of trying, and we are still pouring our hearts out in ministry. We're serving other people. We are loving on the teenagers that God has blessed us with through our youth group, and the whole time just having an inward struggle of just that sadness and that depression of you're praying and believing for something and you're not seeing any results. I remember every Sunday morning for service during the worship time, I would just be worshiping God and still continuing to praise Him and thank Him for all the goodness in our life, but at the same time my heart was just so sad. I would just cry. Just a lot of sadness. Like Jason was saying, I felt kind of depressed about the situation, just of us pouring out, but not seeing the results and not seeing the promise of life, the promise of having a baby.
And so about this time, I'd been seeing a couple doctors on just some other medical issues that were going on in my life, and one of my doctors wanted me to go see a specialist because he felt that my spleen had become enlarged. And so I'm like, all right, here we go again, you know, another medical problem with my body. And I went to this doctor, and I was really confused because the doctor that he had referred me to was in the Beaumont, at Royal Oak Beaumont, the Beaumont Cancer Research Center. And I'm like, why am I going to the Cancer Research Center? I have no idea. And so I went to the doctor's office, and he began to do a couple things, look at me and said, okay, here's our course of action. We want to do this, 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 and this, and we'll find out what's going on. And so I felt pretty encouraged by it, and as I'm checking out at the little reception desk that the doctor's offices have, the nurse there said, what's your diagnosis? And I looked at her kind of confused, and I said, I don't think I have one yet, but I don't know. And I'll never forget, she leans back in her chair and she yells down the hallway to where the doctor was and said, Dr. Rollin, what's the diagnosis? And he yells back from the back of his office really loud so everyone could hear, he's got lymphoma. And so I think there were some HIPAA laws violated in that moment right there, but I began to just freak out. I had no idea that that's what these doctors thought was happening. And as it was a surreal moment for me as I'm walking out of the doctor's office, I've got my slip for the next appointment, and I'm like shaking, and I remember getting back to my car and I began to sit down, and tears just began to stream down my face because I'm thinking about death, I'm thinking about my wife, I'm thinking about all the things and dreams that we have, children someday, family, and I'm just freaking out. And I began to drive, and if you've ever been to Royal Oak Beaumont, in the back of their building and their property, there's an area where by the parking structure there's a road that kind of goes around, and there's a big left turn that there's no stop sign, it's just a big left curve. And right at that curve, God spoke to me. He spoke to me as clear as He's ever spoken to me. It wasn't an audible voice like you hear me now, but it was literally the Spirit of God speaking to me, and He basically said, do you trust me? Do you trust me in this moment? And a verse came to my mind that said, listen, He takes care of the birds of the air. How much more does your Father in heaven who loves you is going to take care of you? He said, do you trust me? And I'm wiping tears away, and I'm like, yes, Lord, I trust you, And I said, I'm going to walk through this. I'm going to walk through this. So test after test after test that I took, each test came back negative. And they even had to remove my spleen because it had gotten up to be 10 pounds. I mean, we were having a baby in a different way. I didn't even realize it. And so I remember the last time I was in the doctor's office, he looked at me, and I've never seen a doctor disappointed that his diagnosis was wrong. And he looked at me and said, I don't know what it is, but you don't have cancer. You are completely cancer-free. You don't have lymphoma or anything. And it was one of the most relieving, joyful moments of my life, knowing that I'm all right, that I could trust God through this situation, and He was there for me every step of the way.
God's timing is just so amazing. I couldn't imagine having a newborn baby and having a husband struggling with all of this. Sometimes when we're praying for things, we don't understand why God's not answering us right away. But always when you look back, you just see God's hand of faithfulness and Him just setting up all the events, knowing everything and having your best interest in mind. And sometimes we see the delay and we think of despair when He sees our delay and He knows that He's preparing us for His blessings.
So about 2009, still no baby, cancer-free, but still saying, okay, God, we know this is in your hands. We love you. We believe in you. We offered our request to you still daily, but we were going to focus on the positive things. We were going to focus on what God was doing in our life currently. And so, we were still youth pastoring. We were going to take a trip to Israel. I was even saying, all right, Lord, if there's no baby coming, I'm going to go buy a sports car. I'm going to get a nice 2-seater convertible. Come on, somebody. And just enjoy life. And I'll never forget the morning that we were going to go to the airport to get on a plane to go to Israel, my wife comes out of the bathroom and says,
I'm pregnant!
I was still in the bed. I was wiping the sand dust out of my eyes, and I said, "What?" She said,
I'm pregnant. I couldn't believe it, but of course he didn't believe me.
I looked at that thing, and maybe some men out there, you can help me out. I see this thing, and I see one pink line and one kind of faded pink line. And so I looked at my wife, and I said, "I'll be right back." And I went up to CVS, and I got one of them tests that said yes or no. I mean, I wanted to know for sure if we were pregnant.
Because of the busyness and us getting ready for the trip, we didn't have time to take the test. So we waited until we got to the airport. And as we're about ready to board and go to Israel and experience all of, the places that Jesus, walked and everything in the Bible, I took the test again, and I walked out this time with just tears in my eyes, saying, I'm pregnant. I can't believe it. I'm finally pregnant.
And I remember embracing her in an airport and just crying our eyes out, just thanking God for the answered prayer. And we were going on a trip to Israel. We couldn't tell anybody for 2 weeks, but it was one of the most intimate, one of the most close moments that my wife and I probably ever had in our marriage. That we could know that God answered our prayer and that there was life growing inside of her.
So later that year, November 3rd, I gave birth to a beautiful little baby boy, Christian Rollin, charming just like his dad. And then 2 years later, the Lord blessed us with a beautiful baby girl, Eliana, who is feisty, also just like her dad. What I would say to those who might be struggling with infertility or another prayer request that you haven't seen answered for months and months or years is just to hang on, to enjoy the season that you're at, and know that God's got his hand on your life. Know that he is in control and that he will be faithful to you.
What I would say to anybody who feels like God has been delayed, I would encourage you that even though it may seem like he is delayed, that God does have perfect timing, and that he's working even when you can't see him working. He's doing things in your life currently right now that you can't see, but he's building faith in you, he's building perseverance in you, and he's doing a work inside of you that he couldn't have done any other way but through this situation. So if you're holding on for something, if you're believing God for something, you feel like he's delayed, don't give up. Keep holding on to the promises of God.